This is reverse engineering the big exit, what buyers really pay for. By the end of the session, you'll be able to understand exactly what serious buyers are looking for in a company they'll pay top dollar for. You'll be able to identify the invisible drivers that increase valuation and walk away with a framework to build or restructure your business so that it's exit ready. And it doesn't matter if you're not planning to sell for years, or you think your business is too small, or if you've never even thought about the exit before, because exit planning, it's a process, not an event. It does take time. It's like running a marathon. You have to get ready and in shape. So today's conversation is not theory. It's a proven process that we'll be walking through. And we've helped founders across multiple industries and stages structure their business, increase their valuation for successful exits over 25 years. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce my colleague and fellow growth thinker, Jeff Jones, the VP of Growthink Capital. Welcome, Jeff.
Hi, Tim. Thank you. That was a really good intro. Nothing more to say here.
Nothing more to say here.
Yeah.
So we are talking about the reverse engineering. One of the co-founders of Growthink, Dave Levinsky, wrote the book on it.
Yeah.
Start at the end. So when we start thinking about starting at the end, it can sometimes feel a bit daunting. But how does someone really define the end goal? How can we help people define maybe what's most important to them?
Yeah. It starts with a conversation. Oftentimes, the owner operator personifies the business, right? And vice versa. So it gets very personal. And you have to go through a process to understand what outcome is possible to better understand what's important. Things like money and value and what my company is worth. Thinking about legacy and continuity and succession, for your people, for your family, for the business itself. Thinking about terms and structure of a deal, what that might look like for you at the end of the day, and whether or not your business is sellable, whether or not you're running a business as more of a lifestyle situation, which is perfectly fine and great over time, or are you built to sell? And so first steps are, okay, where do we want to go, and let's work our way back here to see what we need to do to get there. But it all starts with a very candid and authentic, serious situation about you personally and the business, and understanding those ideal outcomes, those goals, and trying to get to the end.
Okay, so let's take that a step deeper, which is let's imagine we're having that conversation right now, and you're helping me get over some of these emotional hurdles, potentially. You help me define some of my goals and maybe even prioritize some of those things. What are the key questions that owners should be asking before they even attempt to sell?
Yeah, so generally it's how do you create an optimal situation for yourself and for the business, and what will the market actually allow you to do? So, key personal and financial questions. What do I need net in terms of proceeds? What are those goals for me and my family? What's my involvement now and post transaction over time? Something where you might be involved for years to come as an operator, as a board member, or not. And what are you able to do in your mind? What does the business look like post sale going forward? We talked about continuity and things, and that does depend on the market, does depend on the buyer, understanding who the buyer is, what that buyer profile looks like. And then, of course, timing. I think when you look at timing from the micro and the micro being, hey, the actual execution process of us going to market and going through that process to actually sell a company takes time. It could take 4, 5, 6 months, a year. It just really depends. So you have to kind of think through that, as well as the macro side being general market sentiment. There are good times and bad times to potentially sell your business depending on macro conditions, micro conditions in your industry as well. And so things to consider. Our argument is it's always a good time to sell if you find the right buyer and the position the company in the right way, but timing's a big deal as well. So those core answers, I think, need to be at least uncovered and evaluated, that kind of goes into the exit planning scenario, oftentimes years in advance. But those are kind of the core areas to focus on.
So it feels like if someone's not viewing the process and the timing through the right lens, then that could potentially lead to some misaligned expectations.
Yeah.
So let's
Yeah.
touch upon misaligned expectations, because It feels like misaligned expectations could probably sit at the top of deal killing when it comes to exits.
Yes, for sure. I think number one is, the urgency should be felt early on. You need to take a proactive approach, which I think is in contrast with more reactive approaches a business owner might take, where, okay, well, we're 12 months, we're 6 months, or maybe I'm getting calls from people or I have interested parties. It's kind of too late to go through that. And so, um, the misalignment is about expectations, and that will break deals or will kill deals before they even start. The number one reason is going to be valuation. When there's a misalignment between what the market or buyers expect and what you expect, number one reason at all, always. And so oftentimes, if it's your business and you've been building and running it for a certain amount of time, you're somewhat objective or subjective about it and emotional, as you said earlier, Tim. And so that does drive people to think maybe they're worth more than they actually are, right? And that's kind of all of us, is natural, inherent human quality. And so, thinking about that first and foremost is really important. I think another misalignment is time to close. So, as I said earlier, these deals, these types of transaction processes take time. You have to understand that. You have to prepare for that. And frankly, you have to continue to operate the business as if it's not going to happen. So there is no hiccup in performance or fundamentals. I think often too, people don't realize there's a lot of structure now embedded within these potential deals when you're selling a company. And that could mean rolling equity. It could mean earnout scenarios, seller notes, equity and debt financing to close something. And so, that does throw people off. And I think getting educated on that front is incredibly important, because 85% plus of, these transactions are structured. And so I think that's another big issue where things could go wrong quickly. You talked about emotion. For sure, we have a kind of a name for that. We call it founder's disease. When you go into a process like this and you're very subjective, you're somewhat unreasonable, you're inflexible, your mindset is very narrow in terms of what could or could not happen, and that will for sure have a negative impact in just the overall conversations with the buyers in the market, and eventually, ultimately, probably hurt the deal. And so, not understanding market expectations, I think, is a big deal. So, getting informed, knowing the landscape, how things are getting done in your space, what buyers are active. And so this is part of this process we talk about of planning, is getting informed, getting educated. So when you go into the process, those misalignments turn into alignments in terms of what you are expecting, and there won't be those blowups that we see all the time on the front end of those deal conversations.
Yeah. Sidebar on that. There's also a lot of self-education that can be done
Yeah.
on learning these different types of deal structures. So, we always tell founders, you've spent your career learning everything you need to know about your business, and this is the final stretch. You should now spend the final stretch of your career learning everything you can about this process, because it's going to be the biggest event that you run through that affects you and your family and generational wealth and all of this. Like, you should spend there's an equal amount of importance. And again, you can go to Google, you can go to ChatGPT, you can pick up
Yeah.
the phone and call Mr. Jeff Jones, and he'll walk you through it in depth. But you need to go further than you've potentially gone up until this point.
We always encourage our prospective clients and even clients to do that. I mean, I think the tools available and the information available and the access available now is better than ever. And quite frankly, Tim, most folks, when we start talking to them about this process, they are somewhat informed. The information is just out there. And I think, too, there's a lot of proactive movement from the buy side to connect with some of these companies over time and develop relationships, whether it's private equity, strategic buyers, or even investment bankers like us. And so naturally, you get informed, kind of, in a way that maybe you hadn't before. So
Hmm.
I do want to give people credit. They come to the table now with a bit more information than before. And so absolutely, those tools are out there.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about value drivers,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, it's reverse engineering a big exit. So if we know what those value drivers and those levers are that we can pull, that we have more control to make the business more valuable, then let's say if we're starting today and we know we want to exit in 3 years, it's like, what can the business owner out there paying attention to this conversation do to drive their valuation up?
Yeah. So, the idea is getting your business to a sellable state, number one, which requires some work you may or may not be familiar with, which we'll talk about here in a second. And the other piece, going back to prioritizing what's important, oftentimes it's maximizing value, right? And so those things are really that's what buyers are paying for. And so when you talk about those valuation drivers, first and foremost, it's going to be the fundamentals of the business. Great fundamentals in terms of performance, growth, and profitability, for example, will create tremendous market traction every time. And so that's number one is how do you get your business financially healthy to a point where every buyer in the market will check the box in terms of top line growth, in terms of EBITDA, for example. We actually have a little saying here at Growthink called the Growthink Rule of 20, where, and you might have heard me say this before if you've talked to me in the past, but if you can achieve 20% growth, for let's say a 2 to 3 year span and deliver 20% EBITDA based on that top line revenue, you're going to be in a very good position fundamentally from a financial perspective. And quite frankly, a lot of valuation is driven by financials, right? Let's be honest about that. And so that is first and foremost the largest or the most impactful value driver we will talk about and see in the market. Looking at the way you do business, having recurring or reoccurring revenue streams that are highly scalable, that's a big deal now more than ever, right? And I'm not just talking about, SaaS software models, subscriptions, reoccurring client revenue, meaning certain clients that keep coming back and purchasing to, regardless of the industry. Those types of revenue streams will attract more value in the market for sure, specific buyers. Brand value, whether you're in a consumer business or energy or healthcare or even, manufacturing, industrial, the brand value of the organization of the company is massive, because if I'm a buyer and beyond just the financial perspective of the business, I'm looking at synergies. I'm looking at how this business is reflected in the market, and that brand holds value. And so that will drive the conversation as well, and hopefully, allow for premium multiples. Differentiation in the market, another one, Tim, competitive advantage, how you're doing things differently, whether it's with some kind of intellectual property or, brand related aspects of the business, product, service, people, whatever that might be, quality of your delivery, customer loyalty, things like that. That competitive advantage that really creates that moat for you in the market, massive. Because again, if I'm a strategic or synergistic buyer, that has great value beyond just the numbers, right? I can leverage that. That's a big one. And then, just generally speaking, certainty around the business. So we call that de-risking. Things like going to market with a well-diversified customer base with no specific customer concentration, meaning is any one customer generating 20, 30% of total revenue for you? If so, then that could be a risk for the market, and they may discount you based on that. I'm not saying it's a deal killer, but it's something that drives more certainty into the asset that I'm acquiring, right? Customer retention, loyalty, that's a big deal. Reducing owner dependency. If you're an owner operator, you need to have a fantastic management team around you, whereas if you do exit, right? Or the key people decide to go based on that transaction event, post-transaction, you need to have continuity at least available for the buyer, right? And that means having your lieutenants being able to operate the business day to day, to be able to think strategically, to be able to solve problems. So even if a financial buyer comes in, they can kind of hand the reins over and go. And that's a big deal. So if the business is dependent on you, that's going to impact general valuation for sure. The less dependent, the better. So the management team focus is always a big deal. Things like corporate governance and financial controls, right? Having really clean books and financials that are reviewed or audited by an external party. Just having good corporate governance, as if not saying you need to be like run like a public company, but something that in terms of ethics and just general controls and what you're doing, it's very solid. There's a plan, it's written down, and it's kind of embedded within the culture.
So I want to do a recap here when we're talking about the value drivers.
Yes.
So I'm going to run quickly through this. Number one, financial health. Number two, recurring or reoccurring revenue, which is revenue dependability. Number three is focusing on your brand value. Number four is having good differentiation in the market via IP or data. Number five was certainty, so having a certain level of de-risking.
Yeah.
Number six is owner dependency, so having an upgraded management team so you can pull out of the day-to-day. And number seven was corporate governance and having good old-fashioned clean financials. What are we missing there?
Yeah, some other things too. On top of that, I think operating procedures that are standardized in the organization and written down is huge for any buyer when you talk about de-risking, right? It's like having a playbook um, for anybody coming in to be able to go out and continue to operate. A couple things too I'd like to mention. The understanding the buyer set is critically important. Why? Because when you go to market, you need the buyer needs to be able to identify synergies, right? It's not just a financial acquisition. There has to be strategic alignment, and that's going to create a much higher likelihood of close and ultimately drive value. So things like value creation, economies of scale, operational efficiencies, complementary strengths, the talent in your organization. If you can identify and demonstrate that to the market in kind of your storytelling and knowing who that buyer is, massive advantage. And that's exactly what we help do, for our clients. And finally, just generally, and like I said earlier, open-mindedness and flexibility around what's potentially going to happen as the owner and the seller. And then nothing drives value at the end of the day like a competitive process. If you have multiple buyers interested, like any other asset you would sell in what you're doing in your business, naturally the people that want it most are going to pay more. Right? And again, aligning in that way, you align with the best partner possible. You kind of flush it all out. So running a competitive process allows you to do that versus just talking to one buyer, one person, one group.
When we talk about having a good, strong exit team, naturally you can do this on your own.
Yeah, yeah,
But if you're building out an exit team, like who would be those key players that you would want on your exit team?
yeah. So I call it the holy quaternity. It's the four kind of the four horsemen. Obviously, your investment banker, right, that has the transactional expertise, the market expertise, the deal making experience, to be able to navigate the transaction and prepare for it. Your securities or corporate attorney on the legal side, a massive need there. Your CPA or accountant that understands the books, help putting together the financials, because that's going to be the key driver of any due diligence process. And then probably your wealth advisor, right? Someone that understands the management of your money and your personal situation before and after the transaction to have that wealth plan in place. Critically important for you and your family. So those are kind of the four legs of the stool, if you will, Tim,
Okay.
that I would have on my exit team.
What would you say is step number one?
Yeah, step number one, again, I think explore the market, but start talking to people that have either done this before or do this professionally, such as an investment banker like ourselves here at Growthink Capital, just so you can understand, the current environment, what to expect, the steps you should be going through to prepare, right? And those conversations are can be informal, somewhat casual, just having a conversation around the business and where it might stand in the market. I think that could be incredibly useful for any potential seller going out. That'd be my step one for sure, to have a conversation around that.
Okay. So we will put your contact information below if you're out there in the audience and you're considering selling your business. Now is a perfect time to pick up the phone or send an email to Jeff Jones and just start having the conversations. That's what we do all day long. If you want to take the process a little more in depth, we are hosting a 3-hour exit ready sprint coming this Friday. And if you could just put in the show notes, interested, we'll swing back around and give you the details for that. It's 9 a.m. to 12 p. Pacific Standard Time. Again, it's a 3-hour exit planning sprint. We will have more of those coming up in the rest of the year. So, Jeff, thank you so much. Any parting words?
Look forward to speaking to anyone that wants to have that conversation. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks, Jeff.
Bye.